Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Preservation School on Cultural Resource Surveys. We have another Preservation School coming up on the New York City Parks Department on June 21st. In addition to Preservation School, HDC has several walking tours coming up as part of our Preservation Conference programming and our Grassroots Preservation Awards on June 13th. Please check out our website, hdc.org, for more information and to sign up. Tonight's class will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel for free viewing. You may also watch all of our previous Preservation School classes and virtual tours on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions about programming, you can contact me at marbulu@hdc.org. I want to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council, and New York State Council of the Arts for supporting Preservation School. Now I will hand it over to Marissa Marvelli to lead tonight's class. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marissa. I am an independent historic preservation professional. I'm based in Kingston, New York these days, up in the Hudson Valley. But I have spent much of my professional career in New York City, and I cut my teeth there in the preservation world in various capacities. Prior to becoming an independent consultant, I worked as a preservation project, I want to say architect, designer for BKSK Architects in Manhattan. I was also their marketing director and director of business development. I also served on the various boards like Historic Districts Council, Docomomo, New York, which is the documentation and conservation of the modern movement. I'm sure I'm leaving a few other things I've done out. I moved to Kingston in 2014, and since then I've had the great fortune of teaming with a well-known architectural historian in this area named Neil Larson, who has a ton of experience doing cultural resource surveys. So I feel like much of what I'm sharing is lessons I've learned from him through him. We still do a lot of work together. We're working on a cultural resource survey, more of a landscape survey in the town of Marlborough in Ulster County, up here in Ulster in Hudson Valley. Sorry, this focuses on apple farms, orchards, and we also did Lansingburg and Troy together, which was a massive, intensive level cultural resource survey of an urban neighborhood that has since been listed to the National Register of Historic Places. So I'll cover some of that in this talk here. But before I dive in, and I don't know if I can see the comments here. I hope I can see the comments here. Is everybody New York City based in this group? Everyone interested in understanding cultural resource surveys as they apply to New York City, or if anybody here interested in how you might do one outside of the city? I don't know if you can comment, and if the comments will pop up. I'm not seeing my comments.
You can put your responses in the chat. You should be able to see it, Marissa, and if not, I can let you know.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing the chat window. So you throw a question or comment in the chat window. Hopefully I will see it at some point. Oh, here we go. Sorry. It just, I guess when you're, oh, here, yeah. Okay. Oh, we have a Troy person. Hi, Troy person. And I think everyone else is in New York City, which is fine. So if you're here because you want to know how to make a convincing case to the Landmarks Preservation Commission on a proposed historic district, what I'm going to cover will do that, but this is not geared towards the frames of making a case for landmarks. This is making a case for National Register listing, because any historic district you might be doing in the city, a logical first step would be National Register, because then you can turn around and go to landmarks and say, hey, this is district that's already recognized as significant by its listing in the National Register. You should do the same. And a lot of the work that's done to get a district nominated, it's the same work that goes into a RFE, request for evaluation, to the Landmarks Commission. So this is not going to focus so much on landmarks. This is going to focus on, what you do when you're collaborating with the with the State Historic Preservation Office, which I'll be referring to as SHPO, and the National Park Service. But mostly this is a cultural resource surveys happen in collaboration with the State Preservation Office. So I'm going to advance my slide. Hopefully it works. Okay, what is a cultural resource survey? In a nutshell, it's data collection. You're going out there and collecting as much data as you can about the built environment of a place. Keeping in mind that not everything is reflected in the buildings, that a lot of these, the history of these places it's intangible heritage. So as you move forward through a survey, you want to keep an open mind about what constitutes heritage. So you're collecting data, you're identifying sites, you are evaluating sites. Those are the essential components of a survey. Generally, what we're going to be talking about today is a reconnaissance level survey and an intensive level survey. Those are the two main types of cultural resource surveys that we do, when you're working with the SHPO to document a place. Reconnaissance is, like the term suggests, it's a light, a once over survey of an area, useful for characterizing its resources in general and for developing a basis for deciding how to organize and orient more detailed survey efforts. Now, that quote comes directly from the National Register Bulletin number 24, which is published by the National Park Service. So I urge you, if you're looking to start a survey, to reference that document. It can be found on the National Parks website, National Register Bulletin number 24. And it's a bit dated. I mean, I think it's published in the 80s or so, but the information in there is still very relevant and helpful. So here are two examples of cultural resource surveys I did that was a reconnaissance. That's, again, it's a windshield survey. One is in the town of Lenox, which is Western Massachusetts, and El Barrio, which I did in collaboration with Ascendant Neighborhood Development and Landmark East Harlem. I would argue that the town of Lenox survey was much easier than the El Barrio one, because the survey area was much smaller, and the context it wasn't as broad, and we're going to get to context in just a second. One thing to note is both of those surveys were paid with funded in part with grants. The Lenox one with the state of Massachusetts grant, and El Barrio was funded through the Preservation League of New York State grant called Preserve New York. And a lot of my surveys are funded that way. The grant application, I think, is in April, May, sometime it's in the spring, usually in the spring, and they make the announcement in June, July. So the next round, this year's round, will be announced very soon. So again, this is showing just the survey area map. I know it's hard to see on your screen. So on the left is Lenox and on the right is El Barrio. Maybe geographically they might be the same, but on the left, we're looking at a survey area of 620 buildings. And then on the right, we're looking at a survey area of 1,300 buildings. So even though it's the same geographic area. So it's just a lot more documenting when you're looking at number of buildings. So as I said, reconnaissance is windshield survey. You basically want to get a sort of snapshot of an area. You want to characterize, it's the buildings, characterize the development patterns in terms of the streets, it's major transportation arteries, it's topography. The intensive level is you're really going building by building, and you're trying to define the buildings in terms of typology and architecture, how they relate to the broader context. And again, context, that word I keep saying, I'm going to talk to you in a second about what context means when I say that. You're also, when you're doing an intensive level survey, that means you've already done very cursory research. So you're all your research is tying to the broader themes that were identified in that reconnaissance survey. Themes can be architecture, it can be immigration, it can be industry, commerce, transportation, and So how do the buildings convey that story? It's basically what you're doing with an intensive level survey. You're also keeping in mind that if you're doing an intensive level survey, you're probably moving towards doing a National Register nomination. And a lot of people who prepare National Register nominations get tripped up in the part 7 physical description. I think part 7 and part 7, sorry, when you're describing the place, it includes a building list, an inventory. So you have to describe every single building in the district. And for, let's take this example of this Gothic revival cottage house in front of us. So you would be saying that this is a 5-bay, in looking at the facade with the entrance center, with the centered entrance, 5-bay, 2-story, side gable, wood frame house with board and batten siding, slate shingle roof, blah, blah, blah. And you're doing that for every single building. And that's takes a lot of time. So whatever work you can save yourself an intensive level survey in terms of defining building typologies, understanding the architecture, what are the common building types, you can sort of reduce the amount of work that you will be needing to do as you move towards preparing the National Register nomination. Surveys are assessment. You're assessing the buildings, sites, parks that you're surveying, and again, tying it back to that context. It's important in assessment not to, well, I'm going to make that point when I get to another slide, so pause there. Okay, finally, historic context statements. You create any cultural resource survey should begin with a context statement. I think it's so easy for us preservationists and building architecture lovers to just say, this neighborhood is beautiful, we should get it should make it a district. And so we're really, we're moved by the aesthetics. But districts that have greater integrity go beyond aesthetics. And the surveys that they come out of begin with a historic context statement. And so I just threw a ton of text at you. I'm not expecting you to read it. So this was the context statement, draft context statement that was written for the El Barrio study that was completed in 2022. And basically, in a nutshell, historic context statements they serve as the viewfinder for the survey. They help frame what you're looking at, what you're looking for, and how you're defining it and describing it. Historic context statements prevent you from going all over the place and survey work, where you can say, oh, well, that's interesting and that's interesting. Surveys can get really out of hand if you're not, if you don't have this framework of a context within the work. So El Barrio, we knew right off the bat that immigration was a major story, was a major theme of the district. It's called El Barrio for a reason. It's the cultural heart of the Puerto Rican diaspora. But before that, it was home to other diasporic immigrant and migrant groups. And so even in a reconnaissance survey, which is a very preliminary survey, you would draft one. You're obviously coming to a survey with a base knowledge of a place. It's not like you're completely like, what is this place? You can tell either maybe it's the architecture, maybe it's the type of construction that you see, of industrial architecture. But it's important to keep in mind that this is an evolving thing. So a draft context statement will change as you take in more information and you begin to make more informed assessments of a place. So with each iteration, with the reconnaissance and then the intensive and then the nomination for the National Register, which is then basically the historic context statement moving to the significance narrative. This is the statement of significance of this place. I feel like I'm just talking a lot. So if you have any questions, I have my chat window up, so don't hesitate to throw questions in the chat window. So the survey, ultimately, you're going to produce a report, and you're going to have your findings, and any good report has detailed recommended actions, and that can be, most common recommendation is more study. So especially if this is a reconnaissance survey, if it's an intensive level survey, then you're making a recommendation for National Register historic districts, local landmarks, individually significant sites, places, and that can be for local LPC, that can be for National Register nominations. You're also trying to categorize sites and places and buildings by themes. So for El Barrio, what was very significant, it's one of the largest concentrations of government subsidized housing complexes in the country. This survey area, which is the southern half of East Harlem, has 17 complexes. So the report recommends a multiple property listing for them. So that would be a way of getting 17, or I actually don't think I recommended all 17. I recommend a study of all 17, but maybe not all 17 would get listed, but together as a theme of post-war housing, government subsidized housing. And then non-traditional preservation tools. So I recommended a website blog kind of in the vein of Soho Memory Project as a way of sort of further documenting the intangible heritage of a place. And there are other sites that are already existing that's citywide that serve that purpose, but this could be a more neighborhood specific blog. And so survey, you're contextualizing the history, giving an overview. Sorry, I jumped. Sorry, I looked at the page, but that's not what I'm going to say. Excuse me. So other purposes of a survey. Sometimes you're not going into a place to survey it for the first time. Sometimes these places have already been surveyed. Sometimes they're already listed on the National Register. So Newburgh, this slide is Newburgh. Newburgh Easton Historic District, one of the largest historic districts in the city, or sorry, in the state. Why do you think more work needs to be done? Well, Newburgh's East End only focused, it was written in 1985 by my colleague and mentor Neil Larson, excellently written, but only with a lens towards architectural excellence. Like this was the place of A.J. Downing. This is the place of Frederick Clark Withers. This is the Calvert Box land. So we have really amazing examples of picturesque movement architecture, but the nomination that resulted in the listing doesn't touch at all on the immigration. It doesn't touch really at all on industry. It doesn't talk about, the urban renewal destruction that happened and how that shaped the neighborhood that it is today. So the folks in Newburgh have gotten a grant from the National Park Service to basically do a reassessment, reevaluation, and expand the period of significance and expand the significance narrative to be more inclusive of the minority population, immigrant history, industry, and tell the story of urban renewal. And so while I'm showing it, they submitted a grant application to Preservation League for a Preserve New York grant to look at actually expanding the historic district or doing a new historic district that would touch on the more workaday housing that wasn't really included in this huge East End. That is not the sort of traditional preservation that we do or we used to do, where this is pretty architecture. A lot of this is kind of rough, but it's important in telling the lower right-hand photo is a photo of a boarding house. And there's lots of these boarding houses, and they were built during the period early 20th century, late 19th century, as the Great Migration was getting underway, and housed a large segment of the city's Black population. And today now it's a diverse immigrant community. So if we get that survey, that's what I'll be doing in the fall. Okay, so moving on to the next part of this presentation, organizing. How do you organize a survey? This might seem like a duh, but in the age of Google Maps and Street Views, so many people just sit on their computer and sort of, walk the neighborhood through Google Street View. And I mean, I do that too before I even go out there, just to sort of get my sense of where I'm going to be walking. But it's really important that you walk the area, take photos, note the topography, try to sense boundaries, where is it sort of together and consistent, and where do you have a lot of missing teeth? You want to try to summarize the character of this place. Also, I can't emphasize enough, try to walk with, if you're an independent preservation person and you're being hired to do this, have your sponsor, the project sponsor, if they're really familiar with the area, if you're working in the organization, try to find local residents, anybody who has a deep knowledge of the place to walk with you. This is Lansingburg. When I'm in East Harlem, I had the great fortune of walking with the team from Ascendant Neighborhood Development, and they have 35 years of experience, investment, dedication, institutional memory of East Harlem, that, there's no way I could have found out the information that they shared with me on that walk, 4-hour walk, without that introduction. I just would not have found it online. And so that was the basis for the entire survey. The survey, which, if I may toot my own horn, has garnered 2 statewide preservation excellence in preservation awards, one from the Preservation League and one from the state government. It just wouldn't have been that. So it's really, really important to walk these places with people who have a memory of the neighborhood. Have a conversation with SHPO. This is essential. I say don't just go out there and start doing this work. SHPO, first of all, you need to have a conversation with SHPO because they have stuff that you can't find online. They know what's been done before. They know what's been surveyed before. Not all of it is going to be on CRIS, which is the Cultural Resource Inventory System. I think I got that right. Their online web tool for seeing what's been documented before. They're going to help guide and shape the survey. So it's really essential that you talk to them early on about themes, about boundaries, size, how you might approach it, partners who you could work with, who you can collaborate with on this, so you're not doing this alone. Surveys take a lot of work and a lot of time. So it really will save you a lot of heartache if you talk to SHPO first. So boundaries. So you're going to do a draft. You're going to draft a contact statement. You're going to do a boundary justification. These are part of the materials that you will need to submit to SHPO, or your preservation consultant will need to submit to SHPO in order to approve a survey project. And so I know this is very messy. This is an 1872 map of Lansingburg in Troy. It's the northernmost neighborhood in Troy. And what makes Lansingburg so special is the fact that it's one of the early urban gridded cities. It postdates obviously Philadelphia, Savannah, but it was before gridded cities really took off, because this is 1771, and you don't really see gridded cities really spread across the country until you have, Westward Ho after the Revolutionary War. So this is one of the earlier late 18th century examples. And so this map, I took the map, I put it into InDesign, and then I started, putting layers of information that I had, like that, like I have a strong block, like meaning cohesive block. The village green, which today you wouldn't know that was the original village green, 1771 village green, based on the New England town model. Churches, schools, and the yellow highlight, which I don't think everyone can see, it's sort of my I'm trying to figure out where are the natural boundaries of a district. It's not always going to be obvious. Sometimes you're going to have a back and forth with SHPO with like, I think you should extend it there. That sounds like a natural boundary. With this one, I was trying to include a huge factory, but it didn't really fit with the context, the historic context statement that I had written. It sort of felt like it's a different period of significance. So working with SHPO and also doing a lot of preliminary research, another great thing about a survey is that it's an exercise in creating a bibliography. You're going to search the archives for historic maps, photos, the 19th century county gazetteers are an amazing resource. City directories, like you're going to see what's out there, what's been written, and what's available to help inform your context statement and help inform the themes that you develop as you move through the survey. Keep going. So this is basically the result of that exercise, that study exercise. This is what ultimately became the survey area. The red being what SHPO wanted, and then the black being, oh, I see this as an expansion area. So I did get more. I did a bigger survey than was asked by the client for this one was the city of Lansing, city of Troy, by the way. And be careful what you sign up for because my fee didn't go up for this. I just did more, and just be careful of biting off more than you can chew. I'm a preservationist at heart, and I knew that the city of Troy had only done one other major historic district, and that was, I think, in the 90s. So I didn't know when they would be coming back again. So I let's go for as much as we can in one go, and that's what resulted in the size of the Lansingburg district, which is, I think, at the end of the day, it was 670 buildings, which is not that big. Another reason to talk to SHPO is to get set up with Checker. I don't know, has anybody here worked with Checker? Is anyone here familiar with Chris system? You can throw it in the chat box. I'm going to just go ahead and describe what it is. So what you're seeing right now on the screen are 3 snapshots of the Checker mobile app. So when you're in the field, SHPO will have approved you for this with the boundaries. I mean, you set it up, the survey parameters on your desktop, and then you can go on the field, and basically you're doing building survey forms in the field. Now, if it's a reconnaissance survey, you're not doing this for every building. That's really important to know. You're just capturing, common types, representative examples. Oh, and we have somebody here with us, SHPO. Hi. You also work live in Troy. That explains that. Sorry. I'm talking to the chat box. So the last window is the building survey form. And so you have 2 different levels of information that can be entered into the mobile app. One is the basic data, which is address, approximate range, building type, historic use, blah, blah, blah. And then you also have intensive level data. Most of this data I don't enter in the field. I just do the house number and street name. Maybe I might do a building date range if I want to do it in the field, and then I take a photo. It's really important also to keep in mind that you can take images later and then connect it through Checker at your desktop if you don't want to kill your battery phone while you're out in the field, especially in the winter when the battery life doesn't last very long. So really in the field, you're just taking photos and noting addresses and any interesting features of a building. You're also using SHPO defined building date ranges, which as I've done more and more of these surveys, they feel to me like they make a lot of sense because they coincide with the wars, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, well, not so much the Revolutionary War, and then the First World War, Second World War, which is when you see a lot of changes in building technology and styles. So if you're not doing a Checker survey, for those of you who are not looking at this as I want to get this just listed on the National Register, so therefore you won't have the tracker tool at your disposal, you're not at a complete loss. You can use Google software tools, and pretty easy. So if any of you have done a Google survey, you can create your own survey form. And so this is something I did for Lenox, Massachusetts. Massachusetts doesn't have Tracker or Chris to help with survey data collection. So I'm going to see if I can quickly jump to another screen, if I can do that elegantly. Yeah, okay. Do all of you see? Let's see if I can do a new share.
And still see the Linux MA survey.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see a moving screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a very basic Google survey form. And it has I put the street number, I put in the address from a drop-down menu, and this is drawn from the property assessor's list. I can do the property type, construction method, blah, blah, blah. I do all of that. I have I created a comment section for myself, and I have a place where I can upload a building photo. So now I'm going to jump to, do you see a Google map? Does everybody see a Google map?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So all of that data gets put into a spreadsheet. It feeds into a Google spreadsheet that I can then use to populate this map and make it an interactive map, which is really great when I share with clients, whether it's a municipality or a preservation organization, because it really helps them visualize the data. Tracker does this too, but Tracker is for the consultant only. It's not for the client. So it doesn't have a public facing aspect of the tool. It's only, you can only use it while you're in the process of doing the survey. And then once you submit all the data, it's gone. And so you can't use, I love the Tracker interface, and I would love to see that the Chris system look like the Tracker interface. I'm getting into the weeds there, but if you ever do it, you will know what I'm talking about. So the Google map is insanely easy to create, and you can update it as you get more data. You just re-upload the Google spreadsheet and it repopulates again. I can do it literally in 5 minutes. You don't need to be a tech wizard to do this kind of stuff, and it's free. It doesn't cost any money. So now I'm going to hop back over to my presentation. Hopefully I can do that smoothly. Okay. Yeah, there's a question, is this presentation being recorded? It is being recorded. Okay. Okay, so does everybody see a spreadsheet now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and this presentation will be made available after. There will be a link on the Historic District Council website. So the survey, the map that we were just looking at, is fed by this Google spreadsheet, and you can really shape it to show any set of data that you want, and then you can also hide certain columns of data if you don't want to show it. But it's just an easy, really super easy way of sort of showing the resources in a place and where they're located. And so that's the map I already showed you. Other tips: be consistent. So you saw the spreadsheet, and there are labels, there are building type labels, there's architectural style labels, there's use labels. You want to be consistent. It's especially if you see yourself using Google Maps eventually. I mean, you should always assume that you're going to be uploading your Excel spreadsheets through a Google Map. So you don't want to have multiple terms for the same thing. So before you go out in the field, sit down, figure out what your categories are going to be, what your types are going to be, what your architecture is going to be, and stick to that and be very conservative. You don't want 100 labels at the end of the day for something. Form and style are not the same thing. It's another duh statement, but I think, we like to say, it's a ranch. Well, ranch is a form. A ranch house is a form. It's not a style. The style could be, there's colonial ranches, there's modern ranches, there's bungalow. There's different types of bungalows. So just keep in mind that form and style are two separate things. And there's an excellent book. I'll send that information to Michelle after this for helping create these typologies, how you organize the survey, structure the survey in terms of the type of data you're going to collect. It describes what exactly is a form, what exactly is a style when you say that. And not all buildings have a style. I would argue not to label a style if it's very iffy, if a lot of details have been removed. Don't feel you need to apply an architectural style to every building. You don't need to say no style either. Don't say no style, just don't say anything. Just say, 2-story row house, just say that. But it's okay not to have a style for everything, save that for the stuff that's obvious. I feel like surveys create greater headaches down the road when they misidentify things. So if you're not sure or it could be multiple things, just don't do any style. I think we all know assessor dates. There's, a lot of counties, municipalities keep building records on file and they give building dates. Take those dates with a very big grain of salt. New York City, a lot of those dates that you see in the property, I forget what database is kept in, what it's called, but those dates are wrong a lot of times, not always, but a lot. Basically, I use the assessor dates to sort of cut off the pre and post World War II buildings. So I have a sense for how many buildings in this survey area were built before World War II and how many were built after. Even that could be a little off, but typically by post World War II, most municipalities, city governments were building records and were keeping track of when buildings were being built. So post World War II, they're more accurate. You can pretty much rely on them. But before then, even New York City, you can't count on them. Photos are really important. You want to try to take pretty photos because ultimately your cultural resource survey is a marketing tool, and you want to be able to accurately capture the architecture of a building. So don't do it when they're blocked by big trees. Overcast days are great. Sometimes they don't result in the most cheerful photo, especially in the dead of winter. So I like to do two types of photography. I do one, the survey, that's basically information. I need this photo to capture as much information about this place or this building site as much, as it can. And then I do the pretty photos. Those are, usually I do those the first time I survey and the last time I survey, because you're going to go back to a survey area over and over and over again. So the first time is sort of like, what's the essence of this place? The last time you're like, oh, I'm missing this building. I don't have a photo of this building. And you're really doing streetscapes. You're trying to get pretty streetscapes. So not only can it be used for a National Register nomination, it also helps with assessment, so the State Preservation Office can, understand the character of the place. And lastly, safety. Safety is, I don't want to come across as you should be afraid of doing surveys, but always be aware of your surroundings when you're in the field. I've done some places that are maybe not the safest. Some sections of Lansingburg was a little sketchy. My scarier places are actually rural, where I'm out, out of town centers, and it's to be blunt, older men in pickup trucks who come up and harass me because they don't know what I'm doing, and they think that I'm there to raise their taxes, or I don't know, or I'm from the deep state. So just answer with a smile when they ask you, what are you doing here? I am doing a cultural resource survey. I am working, and then who are you working for? I find it helpful if you're working for a government or an organization, if they can get the word out that that work is going to happen. So it's not a complete surprise when property owners come outside, like, why are you taking a photo of my building? Most people, honestly, are worried about their taxes going up. So that's what they're worried that you're a real estate developer there. So just be honest about why you're there, and see if they can share, like, how long have you lived here? Like, what is there anything that's cool about this neighborhood? Try to engage them in a conversation and then move along. The report, I'm going to kind of breeze through these pretty quickly. You're basically providing an analysis of the findings. This is a screen capture of the El Barrio report, which showcases 1,300 buildings organized by typology. You're also going to try to put those findings, that data that you collected, into context using the historic context statement that you drafted. You're going to tell the story of the place, the history, why it's important, and then go into overview of the typology. Everything needs a reference back to how are the buildings or the sites, how do they convey the story of the place? And that's what the report is doing. It's like, how do these places convey that story? You want to constantly be talking specifically about, the buildings, streets, blocks, parks. I think so many reports, we get lost in just like, this is the history, but then you're not actually tying it back to, like, citing specific examples of from the data that you've collected. So El Barrio, one of the things that walking there today you wouldn't know, but our barrios have many theaters, and it's an important aspect of the working class neighborhood. So there's just 3 buildings left that kind of tell that story. So we were able to do a page that talked about that. And then the community gardens and public art. And really, I'm sorry, 1 page is not enough, but with a huge report. And so for this reconnaissance survey is one page, but I could see an intensive level survey really expanding on that theme. Don't overlook the power of maps. I think a lot of, not to be biased, older preservationists, it's harder. I get it. The software is ever changing, but maps can say so many things without words. And so what you see in front of you is from Marlboro, New York, and it's a work in progress. So this isn't the final product, but what I'm working with a GIS consultant, which is also something you should always consider, is can you afford to hire a GIS consultant to help take the data and map it and do a series of maps that basically tell the story of the place. Like, so on the right, what this blue dots represent is cold storage buildings. Cold storage is where the farmers would store their apples and extend the marketable season of their apples and other products. On the left is an 1875 map that has all the farmer, like owner names of the site. So you can layer different sets of data onto these maps, and that's something we're working on for this survey. And just to touch on lightly with the GIS is not just important short term, it's really important long term in terms of documenting resources, because you're not always going to have, you go out and you do this huge effort to collect all this data, and then maybe something happens. Maybe if you're lucky, a historic district gets listed to the National Register, or there's a local district or something, but you're going to lose buildings in the process. Like, it just happens, fire or development or whatnot. So this is a way of documenting the history and development of a place, and also capturing the snapshot of a place in time. And again, like I said, it can be building dates, organized by building dates. It can be organized by building typology. It can, the sky's the limit. But to have that data and that GIS data that comes with it, it never changes. So you can use that, it can migrate with different software, online web tools, or, if you do later get the funding to do an interactive map, you can use that data. It's there. You just keep in mind, you're not going to go back and do it again. You're not going to go back and collect that data again. So try to really think forward of like the usefulness of the data that you're collecting and how other future people can use it. Make sure a survey includes conversations, interviews with local residents, local experts. This photo is Marlboro again, and these are two the guy in the red vest is 5th generation apple farmer in Marlboro, farming the same farm for 5 generations. And Howard Baker on the right, I think only 3 generations. But Steve owns this barn. It includes one of the earliest cold storages in Marlboro. Without him, I would not have gotten to see how the evolution of a very specific building type, specific to apple growing. And so in El Barrio, I had numerous conversations with local leaders, community advocates, residents, artists, who challenged my assumptions on what's significant about El Barrio. I had this idea of like, this is the significance. And they're like, why do you call it that? The words I use, the way I frame it. I think it makes surveys so much stronger if you could go ahead and let them challenge you, because the survey will be challenged. Better to have it challenged before it's published. Also, importantly, keep an open mind about what constitutes heritage. Again, East Harlem, this is the People's Church, also First Spanish United Methodist Church, which at first glance, if you're new to East Harlem and you're just walking up the street, you would think, and if you like architecture, you'd be like, what happened in that building? And just keep walking. But it's actually a really significant building in the history of El Barrio, because in 1969 and 70, it was a site of, I'm having a Young Lords Offensive campaigns. They did community breakfasts and closing drives to bring attention to the inadequacy of government services in East Harlem. And so there's another theme that the survey was able to focus on, which is government policy, how government policy shapes a place, and how communities are shaped by it, and in turn, how they shape policy. So surveys are so much bigger than just architecture and aesthetics. That's the point I want to drive home in this presentation. And also, again, harping back on the GIS component of a survey, always think beyond a report. You put in so much effort and research into a survey, and it gets put into an 8.5 by 11 report, and it kind of goes off into the, internet world, but no one sits there and really reads a survey. And let's be honest, who among us are going to sit there and read through a 120-page survey? I would like to think people do it, but it's not our favorite reading. So how can we make that data come alive? And I'm saying that and I have not done it myself. I just want to encourage this group to think beyond the letter-sized report. The report represents so much work, so much research. It's a big case that's being made for the significance of a place. How can you make that come alive to the general population, to government agencies, to landmarks? How do you make landmarks like, hey, this place is special? There are tools. So ArcGIS you can do, and this costs money. Everything I'm about to show costs money and takes time, but they're out there, and I think the range of tools are growing. But you can take that information and create interactive maps. Survey LA, if you're familiar with it, it's an incredible amount of data that's been mapped. You can click on a pen, and that takes you through the history of that site. Why is it important? I guess think bigger than a letter size document. And this is a little Manila. I'm not involved in this with this organization, and I didn't do a survey for them, but I think what they do is they're doing in their neighborhood of Queens is so cool. And imagining, like, in terms of how art and public engagement can raise awareness of the significance of a place and the significance of a community, as they say, placekeeping. And the survey, the work that's uncovered, this is a research and data that's collected in a survey can inform walking tours. It can inform, I mean, public art. It can, there's so much more as a way of, 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 of marshaling public support for a place. So go big. I mean, you've already invested so much in a survey, so don't let it just gather dust on a shelf or in a Dropbox folder. Okay, I think I went a little over, so we got 8 minutes. Anyone, you can either, I think you're able to speak up using your microphone, or you can throw some questions into the chat box. I'd be happy to answer them. I know I covered, I feel like I raced through that really quickly. I'm probably missing some essential points, but hopefully I'll cover them in question and answer period.
If I may speak.
Sure.
I'm Roz Lee. I'm president of Bakas Pilipinas, which is a not New York-based not-for-profit dedicated to preservation of heritage sites in the Philippines. So when you mentioned Little Manila, it's very close to my heart because some of those people are my friends.
They're doing amazing work. Amazing.
They are. I'm not involved because my focus is the Philippines, right? But I collaborate with them. But anyway, I thank you, first of all. This is an excellent presentation. And when you talk about maps, I cannot overestimate the power of those maps. Because like in Little Manila, my friend has been mapping, Filipino immigrant areas of settlement, from the late 1950s, of different areas like Little Manila in New York, Little Manila in LA. So, and she found the theme of these areas being really close to the highways, like the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, which is the Woodside, whatever highway, right? And which we know, it's like the wrong side of the railroad tracks. But to illustrate it for our constituency, is new because we're not really, the railroad track people. It's the freeway track, the freeway people, basically. So I was just so thrilled to see her wonderful maps that really, without much words, it just tells you the story. So I'm like, well, I'm a map addict anyway, so you don't have to convince me. But when I saw that, I was like bowled over, So thank you again.
One of my great regrets, I have two huge regrets from my time at Columbia. One, I didn't take Dorothy Miner's preservation law class.
Me too.
In life. Two, I didn't take GIS class, and that was offered. And now, with this explosion of internet technology, software to mapping software, that you can just instantly make this data come alive and really connect the dots in ways that you just can't do in written form. And so I'm going to touch on one question about cost. Like, it takes money. It takes money to do so. It takes resources to do it. To hire a preservation consultant, I would almost argue nowadays it's essential to hire someone a GIS person if you don't have the in-house capabilities of doing GIS. that the two go hand in hand, like the mapping and the written assessment of the place. And so those are two fees you're looking at. And how I price my surveys, it's every survey is different, but it's mostly based on the size of the place and how much research I think is going to need to be done. Some places have a lot of books. They have, a lot of histories have already been written, so I have a lot to work with. So it's not so much archival research that requires my time. So I know ballpark numbers. I think when you're looking at a reconnaissance survey versus an intensive level survey, reconnaissance survey of a 600 buildings could easily cost you $9,000. Like that's just, a pretty safe number. Intensive level, because you're almost at National Register, and almost sometimes they're coupled. Sometimes I'm hired to do intensive level that automatically feeds into a National Register nomination, which are, then that's really two projects in one. That's, we're talking 20 to 24,000 for that level of work, and that's the low end. Honestly, I feel like I see like a lot higher, like Troy with 30,000 for that work, intensive level, and intensive level resource survey coupled with National Register nomination. And that took 6 months of my life of doing that. And, it is sustainable, maybe not, for like livelihood, but I had help. So that made it worthwhile. And so organizations and preservationists who are looking to do this, it helps to see what can you take on yourself, what amount of survey work can you do yourself, so as volunteers, so you're not paying a consultant. That might be the building data collection. That might just be going around building by building and sort of documenting the place. That might be one way of reducing your cost. I think did I answer that question? Okay. Any other questions?
I was going to ask generally how long it takes you, which you kind of just answered. And obviously depends on the amount of research that's been done and how large the area is, but what are the averages of how long it takes you?
So El Barrio was huge. So that was 9 months. I started in July, and I think I had the final draft done by March. So I don't know, someone tell me how many months that is, July to March. And that's a reconnaissance level survey. And El Barrio is different than the other surveys I did because the history is complex. We were talking, if we're talking about an architecturally significant neighborhood, that's a much different story than a place like El Barrio, where the cultural history is so much more important and not obvious. It's easy to walk down a block in Greenwich Village or Brooklyn Heights, like, oh, I know why this place is his historic district. But Barrio that's a harder story to tell, but it's not any less important. It's just it's not your average. Hopefully when it's listed to the National Register, it won't be your average historic district. So that just took so much more work, more research. Also, I think I'm sure I'm not the only one, woefully undereducated and Latin American history and diaspora. And so I had to study that and read and get a working knowledge of that history. So it all kind of, there's so many variables that play that affect the price, the cost, and affect the time. So El Barrio, 8-9 months. Lansing Burke Historic District, which is 620 resources, that was 6 months. 6 months. And it's not like 6 months where I work one day on it and then I work another day on it. That's almost 6 full weeks. Full weeks of 6 months working on that National Register nomination. So it's a lot. It's an enormous undertaking.
I just want to make sure we didn't miss this one. Someone said, is the East Harlem report published and available?
It is. It is available on the Ascendant Neighborhood Development website and the Preservation League of New York website. So I will give Michelle the links, and we can include links to that on the. Is there a place to include these links, Michelle?
Yeah, I can send it out to everyone, and then we also have like resources on our website.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think you were trying to answer this, but someone just sort of had a follow-up question to it. How do people pay for an intensive level survey and our nomination? So I'll just say for HDC, we will usually get funding for it. So we apply either from the city or the state, or occasionally, like a more private grant. So we'll put in like a full application for it with the intention of having the survey done, and then use that money to pay whomever does the survey work. Is that, I think you would kind of mention that that's usually how you're paid, right?
Yeah, and grant opportunities, there's the biggest one that I know of is the Preservation League of New York's Preserve New York grant. And that's funded most of, like the El Barrio survey was funded in part by that. And then Lansingburg was funded by the Certified Local Government Program. Wait, no, they're not certified local. That's Preserve New York grant too. Yeah, a lot of Preserve New York grant funded.
Yeah, we've definitely used that a lot before. Also, for New York, the city council does have something called the was it cultural? I can't think of the actual name now. But it is a grant specifically for cultural initiative grant. That's what it is, and it's specifically for researching the cultural history of an area and presenting it in some way. So we've gotten funding for that a lot. So we've done a survey, I think twice with that money. But so we are after 7 o'clock, and I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you very much for everyone for coming. Thank you, Marissa. This was great. Once again, as we said, this has been recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website. You can also watch all of our other preservation schools and walking tours, and also our conference videos are now up there as well. If you missed our preservation conference, we had that a few weeks ago. Those are all available now. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or Marissa's email is here. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you.